Ethan Williams was the kind of man who believed the world revolved around his charm, ambition, and sharpsuits. From a small-town dreamer to the CEO of a mid-sized tech firm in the heart of the city, he had built an empire through relentless work and an even more relentless ego. His wife, Amelia, had been his anchor from the start, a woman of quiet intelligence, calm patience, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return. Together, they had weathered years of struggle, late nights and financial storms until success finally smiled on them. But success has a way of changing people. It turned Ethan from a man of gratitude into one who constantly sought validation from applause that never ended. The day he met Clarissa, an ambitious marketing executive with beauty as polished as her confidence, was the day his marriage began to crack, though he didn't realize it yet. Clarissa was everything Amelia was not: fiery, daring, outspoken, and always surrounded by attention. At first it was innocent, a few late-night meetings, casual texts, laughter over wine after work. But temptation rarely stays innocent for long. Ethan began finding excuses to stay at the office longer, to travel for urgent business trips, and slowly, the woman who had once built his dream beside him became invisible in the home they had created together. Amelia noticed, of course. She noticed the shift in his tone, the way his phone was always face down, the faint scent of perfume she didn't wear lingering on his shirts. Yet she said nothing, not because she was weak, but because she was wise. She understood that love could not be begged for. It had to be freely given. So she focused on her own work, quietly expanding her influence in the financial world through investments and partnerships that Ethan never cared to ask about. Meanwhile, Clarissa's grip on Ethan tightened. She knew his weaknesses, the need to be admired, the hunger to feel powerful, and she fed them like fire. It wasn't long before Ethan was promising her the world. He spoke of leaving Amelia, of starting fresh, of merging their lives and their dreams. Clarissa smiled, but inside she laughed, because she too had a dream, one that didn't just involve Ethan's love, but his power. Amelia's silence began to unnerve Ethan. It made him feel small, unseen. He mistook her calm for indifference, not realizing that it was the stillness of a storm gathering strength. One evening, he confronted her in their sleek, glass-walled penthouse, his voice cold, rehearsed. "I can't do this anymore, Amelia," he said, pacing as if the movement justified the betrayal in his heart. "You and I, we've grown apart. You deserve someone better, and I've found someone who makes me feel alive again." The words were knives, and he watched for a reaction. But Amelia simply looked up from her laptop, her eyes deep pools of composure. "If that's what you believe will make you happy, Ethan," she said softly, "then I won't stand in your way." Her calm shook him. He expected tears, accusations, maybe even anger, but she gave him peace. And that peace frightened him more than any fight could have. Within a week, he filed for divorce, signed the papers, and moved in with Clarissa, who welcomed him into her luxurious apartment with champagne and promises of a future brighter than gold. Amelia signed the documents quietly, smiling through the storm in her chest. What Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that just 3 days before he handed her the divorce papers, Amelia had finalized a deal through her private investment firm to acquire a controlling interest in Clarissa's company, a marketing firm struggling under debt but hiding untapped potential. The board had practically begged for a savior, and Amelia had stepped in with strategic brilliance. She now owned the very company where Clarissa worked, and Clarissa's future was now in her hands. While Ethan and Clarissa celebrated their new freedom, Amelia sat in her study that night, the city lights reflecting off the windows, a quiet satisfaction in her heart. It wasn't revenge she sought, it was justice served by fate's own hand. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's world seemed perfect. Clarissa was passionate, spontaneous, everything he thought he wanted. They attended parties, posted smiling photos, and whispered dreams of building an empire together. But perfection has cracks, and beneath the laughter, Ethan began to sense unease. Clarissa grew distracted, often on calls, her tone sharp and worried. He caught snippets of phrases: new owner, company shakeup, executive changes. She dismissed his questions, telling him it was just corporate chaos. But one evening, as Ethan scrolled through news alerts, a headline caught his eye. "Private investor Amelia Holdings acquires 70% stake in Clover Marketing Group." His hands froze. Clover Marketing Group, Clarissa's company. His heart thundered as he reread the name Amelia Holdings. The name was no coincidence. Amelia had named her firm after herself years ago. Confusion and dread collided in his chest. He turned to Clarissa, who sat across the room. Her phone pressed to her ear, her expression strained. "Clarissa," he asked slowly, "who owns your company now?" She hesitated, her face pale. "Some investor, Amelia Holdings, why?" The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Ethan's world tilted. In that instant he realized what had happened. His wife, the woman he had so easily discarded, now owned the company of the woman for whom he had destroyed his marriage. He tried to speak, but words failed. Clarissa, too, understood, her confident mask cracking as she saw the truth reflected in his eyes. The empire, she thought, she would rise through was now under the command of the very woman she had betrayed. Outside, the city lights burned like witnesses to their downfall. Inside, Ethan sat frozen between pride and regret, and for the first time in his life he realized he had underestimated the quiet strength of the woman he once called his wife. Amelia didn't need revenge. Fate had already written it for her. And somewhere across town, in the calm of her study, Amelia closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Sometimes, letting go is the most powerful way to win." The morning after Ethan discovered the shocking truth, the world felt unnaturally quiet, as if the air itself had turned against him. He woke up beside Clarissa, but the warmth that once drew him to her had vanished, replaced by a cold awareness that he had trapped himself in a cage of his own making. The headlines wouldn't leave his mind. Amelia Holdings acquires Clover Marketing Group. He repeated the words in disbelief, but reality didn't bend to his denial. His ex-wife, the woman he had dismissed as simple and unambitious, now owned the company that gave his mistress her job, her power, her prestige. Clarissa, once the confident lover who boasted of her position and influence, now sat in her office trembling as new management memos rolled in. Within days, Amelia's quiet, professional hand began reshaping everything. Senior staff evaluations, financial audits, and a sudden board meeting that summoned Clarissa's department for performance review. Clarissa's bravado began to crumble, and Ethan could see the panic in her eyes as she whispered over phone calls, trying to gather allies, trying to figure out what Amelia's intentions were. But Amelia didn't need to seek revenge. The system she had built was already correcting itself. When Amelia finally arrived at Clover's headquarters for the first official post-acquisition meeting, the office air changed. She walked in with her signature calm, elegant, poised, and radiating authority that came not from loud power, but from silent command. The employees whispered as she passed. They had seen her photos in the press, heard stories of her investment genius, but none of them knew the personal history between their new owner and the trembling marketing executive sitting at the end of the conference table. Clarissa tried to hold her composure, but her voice shook when she greeted Amelia, who smiled softly and replied, "Good to finally meet the team." Her tone was polite, professional, but there was a depth in her gaze that said more than words ever could. Ethan, unable to resist, showed up later that day under the guise of supporting Clarissa, but truthfully, he wanted to see Amelia, to understand how she had risen so high while he had fallen so far. When he saw her standing there, effortlessly commanding a room full of executives, his pride fractured. The same woman he once underestimated now stood as a symbol of everything he had lost: respect, dignity, and power. Amelia noticed him lingering by the door, but she didn't acknowledge him immediately. Instead, she continued speaking to the board about the company's restructuring, her voice calm yet firm. Only after the meeting ended did she approach him, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "Ethan," she greeted coolly, as though addressing a distant acquaintance. "What brings you here?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. All he could manage was a whisper. "You bought her company?" Amelia gave a faint smile. "No, Ethan, I acquired an opportunity." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him to drown in his own realization. Clarissa's once glamorous world began collapsing in slow motion. Her department was downsized, her influence eroded, and soon she found herself facing a formal inquiry for mismanagement of client funds, something Amelia hadn't orchestrated but certainly hadn't shielded her from. For the first time, Ethan saw the woman he left his wife for as she truly was: selfish, reckless, and desperate. Their arguments became daily storms, The love that had burned bright now turned to ashes of blame. Clarissa accused him of ruining her life, of being the reason Amelia's shadow haunted her every step. Ethan tried to defend himself, but deep down he knew it was true. He had destroyed everything good in his life by chasing illusions. One night, unable to bear the guilt, he drove to Amelia's new corporate headquarters, a sleek tower that bore her company's name in shining letters. He waited in the lobby until she came down, looking every bit the successful, graceful woman she had always been. "Amelia," he said, his voice breaking. "I made a mistake." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes soft but resolute. "We all make mistakes, Ethan. The question is, what do we learn from them?" He wanted to beg her forgiveness, to tell her he missed her, but he saw in her eyes that the chapter of their marriage had closed long ago. "I lost you," he whispered. "No," she replied gently. "You let me go." And with that, she turned and left, her silhouette fading into the golden lights of the lobby, leaving Ethan standing alone in the reflection of what he could have been. Meanwhile, Clarissa received her final notice the next morning, termination for breach of ethics. Her career was over, her pride shattered. And when she called Ethan to tell him, he didn't even answer. He sat at his old office desk, staring at the divorce papers he had once signed so confidently, and for the first time he understood the true meaning of wealth. Not money, but integrity, faithfulness, and the quiet power of respect. Months passed. Amelia's company flourished, her name becoming a symbol of resilience and brilliance across the business world. She became a keynote speaker, mentoring young women on strength, independence, and grace in the face of betrayal. Every word she spoke carried the weight of experience and the light of forgiveness. She never mentioned Ethan or Clarissa publicly. She didn't need to. Her success spoke louder than revenge ever could. One evening, during a charity gala, she stood before a crowd of leaders and said, "Sometimes, life doesn't punish people, it teaches them. And the best lesson you can ever give someone who underestimated you is to rise so high they have to look up to see you again." Audience applauded, some with tears in their eyes. Among them, unseen, was Ethan, sitting quietly at the back, clapping for the woman he once called his wife, now realizing she had become everything he could only dream of being. As Amelia stepped down from the stage, she smiled, not out of triumph, but peace. She had learned that true victory isn't about destroying those who hurt you. It's about healing so completely that their memory no longer defines you. In that moment, her journey had come full circle. For those watching, her story wasn't just about betrayal or revenge, it was about rediscovery, courage, and the quiet power of self-worth. And as the screen fades for the audience listening now, remember this. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They're often the ones who rise the highest. If you felt inspired by Amelia's journey, don't forget to subscribe, because more stories like this, stories of strength, love, and redemption, are coming next. Your support helps keep these powerful lessons alive. Subscribe, stay inspired, and always remember, sometimes, the best revenge is becoming the best version of yourself.